I think in a situation where nurses are so hard to come by, and Cuba has been so willing, where medical staff has been difficult to train, and Cuba has been so willing to train. Prime Minister Drew, if I remember correctly, was trained in Cuba, and is an example of that level of cooperation. So, as Prime Minister Gonzalez said, if they're threatening to suspend the visas of Caribbean leaders, um, who are involved, as they say, in human trafficking over this matter, and that's the price that we have to pay. The fact is that the contribution that has been given by these doctors and nurses to the region and Cuba, generally speaking, is far more worthy.
If we were to remove all, I read something that if we were to remove all the Cuban doctors from Grenada, we'd be left with one anesthetist and one cardiac specialist.
Mm-hmm.
And they do incredible good. I think there are like over 50 of them here working in the public service, in the hospitals and so on. So it is a huge issue for Grenada.
We want to segue into more geopolitical news that is having a direct impact on the Caribbean region. And that has to do with the Trump administration's threats to sanction countries in the region. In respect, I see, Brian, you're holding your head balding there already. In respect of the Cuban medical program that has benefited so many islands of the Caribbean. Of course, there are the U.S. administration, the regime, and the Secretary of State, Marco Rubio, they're saying that this is akin to human trafficking. It's interesting that Rubio is saying that, given what his ancestors did to Cuban people during the Batista regime. But that's another story. So I want you all to pick up on that. Of course, we have seen the whole bellicose rhetoric of the current regime in Washington. We have seen how they have been conducting diplomacy publicly, calling people into the White House and publicly shaming them, chastising them, using that bully pulpit and that big stick that they have. So how should the region treat with this issue? And will there be serious impacts that we should be expecting? Should the administration go ahead with this? And based on their posturing, they seem to be going ahead with things that they have promised to do. So, Brian, I want to, if you're willing to comment on this, any thoughts on how we should be treating with this issue, given how close we are to America's backyard?
Yeah. Well, I'm watching the response of Prime Minister Dickon Mitchell and the government on this one, and I hope it's going to be a strong response, because if we were to remove all, I read something that if we were to remove all the Cuban doctors from Grenada, we'd be left with one anesthetist and one cardiac specialist. And they do incredible good. I think there are like over 50 of them here working in the public service, in the hospitals and so on. So it is a huge issue for Grenada. And it's going to be a huge issue for every single island in the Caribbean. So I'm watching with great interest to see what the response will be. Will it be from individual governments? I know that the government of Grenada is preparing a response. Will it be from the CARICOM level? Because every government in the CARICOM, every country in CARICOM is affected by this, because every country has Cuban doctors. So all I can say is I'm waiting to see what's going to happen, and I'm hoping that there's a robust response from the individual countries as well as CARICOM as a group, because we can't do without the Cuban doctors. I'm not hearing you.
Yeah, so here's the thing. We can't do without Cuban doctors, but can we survive with American sanctions?
Well, they've already cut aid, U.S. aid. Not that Grenada was getting that much compared to other countries, but they've already cut the U.S. aid, so that's a done deal already. So what else can they do? Well, they could, take away the visas. This is what they're talking about, taking the visas of the government officials, taking away my visa. You live there, so is this what they're talking about? And let's see how far this will go. I think that.
Yes, go ahead.
America, Trump has been backing down left, right, and center. He's backing down on some of the cuts that Doge is making. He's backing down on some of the tariffs. So let's see if he backs down on this one as well.
Well, you're saying let's see if he backs down on this one. His Secretary of State, Marco Rubio, of course, a Cuban American who is the families of the disaffected and badly beaten Batista adherents who fled Cuba following the 1959 Cuban Revolution, and this just appears to be sort of this continued historic revenge and payback that they seem to be enacting on Cuba. But I want to also make the point here, and I'm glad Peter is back. In 2019, Mr. Trump met with some Caribbean leaders at Mar-a-Lago. That was in 2019. The Bahamas, the Dominican Republic, Haiti, Jamaica, and St. Lucia. Other leaders at the time declined to attend that particular meeting. And of course, reporters who were, covering that particular activity said that the leaders were in some sort of close to a kitchen waiting room or something like that, waiting to see this man. So again, Brian Peter is saying that this response should be a united CARICOM response, and it should not be a piecemeal approach each island treating with this, because each island seems to have received an individual letter from the State Department. What
Yeah,
say
and
you?
I agree with Brian entirely, that it ought to be a unified response from CARICOM, and I think that we learn a lot from the Zelensky treatment, that Trump will take advantage of situations in which leaders appear to be isolated, and I think that if CARICOM speaks as a group, that certainly is better. The extent to which Trump knows or even really cares about this type of thing is something that I'm doubtful about, because Trump is transactional, and I don't see any transaction in this. I think this is a Rubio initiative. Perhaps he's doing this to try to regain relevance in terms of the fact that he has articulated a foreign policy on Ukraine that has gone all over the place now. And the questions really are about his credibility and his personal views on things, is in question. So maybe this is part of his saying, well, let me try to recapture some of that lost glory, and I'm gonna nail down this issue. I don't, however, agree that there hasn't really been a response. I listened to Gonzalez, for example, this week, and Gonzalez, to me, summed it up very well when he said, if the question is the visa of Ralph and Eloise, that they will suspend in support of this initiative, and I have to lose my visa, Eloise will lose her visas. That's a small matter compared to the loss of hundreds of lives in St. Vincent and the Grenadines and indeed across the Caribbean that those doctors helped to save. And I can tell you, during COVID, when we had serious nursing challenges, a brigade of nurses came from Cuba. They were employed consistent with all of the Helms-Burton regulations and so on, as I understand it. And the fact is that across the region, the medical staff, especially at the specialist level, have been supporting our efforts, tremendously. Cuba helped St. Vincent and the Grenadines with the airport. They helped Grenada with theirs too back in the day before the revolution. And I think that Cuba has been very, very good to us. And, for us to decide that in this situation we're backing down, it isn't. Look, I think in a situation where nurses are so hard to come by, and Cuba has been so willing, where medical staff has been difficult to train, and Cuba has been so willing to train. Prime Minister Drew, if I remember correctly, was trained in Cuba, and is an example of that level of cooperation. So, as Prime Minister Gonzalez said, if they're threatening to suspend the visas of Caribbean leaders who are involved, as they say, in human trafficking over this matter, and that's the price that we have to pay. The fact is that the contribution that has been given by these doctors and nurses to the region and Cuba, generally speaking, is far more worthy. Far more worthy. And I think that the initiative is hypocritical, consistent with the fact that right now Cuba and America enjoy a better relationship than they have in a long time. And the limits in terms of people sending money back to Cuba have been expanded. Access in terms of travel has been expanded. There's a direct flight from Miami to Havana. And in light of all of that, you're going to double down on something like this is odd. So I haven't heard Prime Minister Motley, and I haven't heard any of the others. But I do think that the idea of a unified response would be an excellent idea under the circumstances. And like Brian, I don't support it. I don't have a lot of time for this initiative. President Trump has been a wrecking ball to global relations, generally speaking. And, he's full of surprises. I think this one is a Rubio initiative, and it worries me.
No, Peter, yes, you say this is a Rubio initiative and Trump is transactional and this is Rubio doing this. But may I remind you that it was in 2019 that Donald Trump, that was even before Rubio was in his cabinet, designated Cuba as a state sponsor of, wait for it, terrorism. Right? So while it may be a Rubio initiative, and while you say Trump is transactional, the record is clear that he was the one that tightened the already tough sanctions in Cuba, and he's the one that tightened the already tough sanctions in Venezuela. So I'm just trying to understand how you can reconcile those two competing issues here.
Right, because in both instances, Trump wanted something.
Okay.
Trump has always enjoyed high levels of support in Florida, and I think that he felt it was necessary to nail down that support to go after Cuba in that instance. And I think the same thing with Venezuela. You're trying to curry favor with a particular group, and these are things which you can do relatively easily. There's no loss to Trump in relation to investments in either of those places. So there's no financial loss. But there's vote gain, and I think that's part of the reason why he would have done it before. As to why he would do it now, as I said, I find it a little bit, because right now he has larger fish to fry. But I understand the initiatives that he would have brought in 2017, consistent with the fact that at that point in time he was saying, look, let me see if I can try to curry favor with a Florida voter that has strong views on Cuba and had strong concerns about the fact that Obama was marching in a completely different direction. And they said, well, let's just bring this matter back to center. So I think that's where he's going. Ultimately, whenever we're looking at Trump and his actions, it is that Trump wants something. And my thing is that in this instance, I really don't know what he could possibly want. And that's my feeling for putting it at the feet of Rubio.
Brian, any thoughts on that? What do you think he wants here outside of terrorizing the region? And in the context, that's why this is what it is. It's imperialism at its best. Yeah.
I think he wants to buy Grenada, buy the whole Caribbean, buy it up. What Trump wants is nobody can answer that question, because honestly, he, like you say, and like Peter says, he's transactional. When he does something like this, he wants to get something in return. What he can get in return from riling up the whole Caribbean, well, he just likes riling up things anyway. But I think that this is probably, as Peter says, more of an initiative from Marco Rubio, who's got an axe to grind with the whole Cuba situation. So,
hi everyone, thanks for checking out the Bub Report's social media pages. If you'd like to get more videos, show highlights, and watch our weekly live show, follow our Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram pages, and also subscribe to our YouTube channel. You can catch repeat episodes on Wednesdays at 4 and 5 p.m. respectively on CRFM Radio and GBN TV in Grenada. We are also viewed on Sundays at 8 p.m. on WPG 10 throughout the Caribbean. Thanks for watching.